The blood pooled beneath the rancher's body where he had fallen from his horse 3 hours earlier, and everyone knew that if the sun set before a miracle arrived, another widow would wear black in Calico, California. It was June of 1881, and the heat pressed down on the dusty streets like God's own furnace, the kind of heat that made reasonable men lose their minds and desperate ones pray to whatever might listen. Clara Emerson knelt beside the dying man, despite the whispers that followed her everywhere, her hands steady as she pressed them against the gaping wound in his side where a steer's horn had torn through flesh and muscle. Her dark hair hung in damp tendrils around her face, and her calico dress was already stained with his blood, but her gray eyes remained focused and calm. She had learned healing from her grandmother back in Virginia, a woman who knew which herbs stopped bleeding and which poultices drew out infection. Knowledge passed down through generations of women who understood that sometimes survival required more than prayer. When Clara had arrived in Calico 6 months ago, alone and grieving her father's death from consumption, she had kept her skills to herself, working quietly as a seamstress and keeping her head down. But word spread quickly in a small mining town when old Mrs. Henderson's fever broke after Clara brought her willow bark tea, and when the blacksmith's son recovered from a rattlesnake bite after she applied a poultice of echinacea and clay to draw out the venom. The rancher, Thomas Caldwell, groaned beneath her hands as she worked, packing the wound with clean cloth soaked in yarrow and golden seal. His wife stood back with the other townspeople, her face pale and streaked with tears, her hands clasped so tightly together that her knuckles had gone white. Clara could feel their eyes on her back, could hear the muttered conversations that never quite stopped when she was present. "Unnatural the way she knows things," someone whispered. "No decent woman should have such knowledge," another voice added. Clara ignored them as she always did, focusing instead on keeping pressure on the wound until the bleeding slowed. The rancher's breathing evened out, became less ragged, and after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, his eyes fluttered open. He looked up at Clara with confusion and gratitude mixed together in his gaze. "The pain," he whispered. "It's less." "You will need to rest," Clara told him quietly. "The wound must be kept clean and changed twice daily. Your wife can do this, or I can come by if needed." Thomas Caldwell nodded weakly, and his wife rushed forward to take his hand. The crowd began to disperse, some grudgingly impressed, others muttering about dark arts and devil's work. Clara packed her supplies back into her worn leather satchel, her hands trembling now that the emergency had passed. She was exhausted, drained in the way that always followed when she pushed herself to save a life. She walked back toward her small rented room above the general store, her feet kicking up dust with each step. The sun was beginning its descent toward the jagged horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if she had the energy to appreciate them. She had just reached the wooden steps when she heard the horse approaching at a gallop, the rider clearly in distress. Clara turned to see a man slumped over his saddle, barely conscious, his shirt soaked through with blood. The horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, came to a stop directly in front of her as though it knew exactly where to find help. The rider began to slide sideways, and Clara dropped her satchel to rush forward, catching him before he hit the ground. He was heavy, all muscle and bone, and she struggled to ease him down gently. "Help me," she called out, but the street had emptied. No one wanted to be seen helping her, not when the whispers of witchcraft had begun to circulate with increasing frequency. The man's eyes opened briefly, and she found herself looking into the most striking blue eyes she had ever seen. They were the color of deep water, troubled and pained. He tried to speak, but only managed a groan. I have you, Clara said firmly. Stay with me. She could not move him alone up the stairs to her room, and leaving him in the street was not an option. The stable was closer, and with effort she managed to half drag, half guide him across the dusty road. The stable boy had gone home for supper, leaving the building empty except for the horses in their stalls. Clara got the injured man into a clean area with fresh hay and immediately began assessing his injuries. A bullet wound, she realized with a sinking feeling. It had entered below his right shoulder and exited out the back, which was both fortunate and dangerous. Fortunate because she would not need to dig for the bullet. Dangerous because of the location near major blood vessels. She worked quickly, building a small fire in the stable's brazier to heat water, washing her hands and the wound thoroughly before packing it with yarrow and comfrey. The man drifted in and out of consciousness as she worked, sometimes murmuring words she could not make out. He was handsome. She could not help but notice, even pale and injured as he was. His jaw was strong and covered with several days' worth of dark stubble, and his hair was the color of mahogany, curling slightly at the ends where it brushed his collar. He wore a cowboy's typical attire, worn denim and a chambray shirt now ruined with blood, a gun belt around his narrow hips. His hands were calloused and scarred from hard work. Clara sat back on her heels once she had done all she could, watching his chest rise and fall with steady breaths. She had no idea who he was or how he had been shot, but she knew that moving him again tonight would be dangerous. She fetched blankets from the stable's storage and made him as comfortable as possible, then settled herself nearby to keep watch through the night. She must have dozed off sometime near dawn, because she woke to find the man's blue eyes watching her. He looked more alert now, though pain still tightened the corners of his mouth. "You are awake," Clara said, moving closer. "How do you feel?" "Like I have been shot," he replied, his voice rough and dry. She helped him drink from her canteen, supporting his head. He drank deeply, then settled back with a grimace. "Thank you, I thought I was done for. The bullet went clean through. You were fortunate. Or you are skilled," he said, studying her face. "You are the healer everyone talks about." Clara stiffened slightly. "I do what I can." "I am Jackson Andrews," he said. "I work cattle for the Double R Ranch about 15 miles north of here." "Clara Emerson." "Well, Miss Emerson, I owe you my life." He tried to sit up and immediately went pale. Clara pushed him back down gently. "Do not try to move yet. You have lost a great deal of blood." "How did I get here?" Jackson asked, looking around the stable with confusion. "Your horse brought you to me. He seems quite intelligent. Red always did have good instincts." Jackson closed his eyes for a moment, clearly exhausted from even that brief exchange. "There were 3 men, cattle rustlers we have been tracking. They ambushed me near Stone Creek. You should report this to the sheriff." "I will, once I can stand without passing out." He opened his eyes again, fixing that intense blue gaze on her. "The things they say about you in town, about witchcraft and dark magic, that is nonsense, is it not?" Clara felt her throat tighten. "I use herbs and knowledge passed down through my family. There is nothing dark about it." "I figured as much. People fear what they do not understand." He reached out slowly and touched her hand where it rested on her knee. "Thank you, Clara Emerson, truly." The touch sent an unexpected warmth through her, and she found herself unable to look away from him. There was something in his eyes, a kindness and sincerity that she had not encountered often in Calico. Most people viewed her with suspicion or outright hostility, seeing her skills as something unnatural rather than useful. "You need more rest," she said softly, withdrawing her hand. "I will bring you something to eat." She left the stable and hurried to her room, her heart beating faster than normal. Jackson Andrews had looked at her like she was something precious rather than something to be feared, and the feeling was so unfamiliar that she hardly knew what to do with it. She gathered bread, cheese, and dried meat, then filled a jar with clean water and headed back to the stable. Over the next 3 days, Clara tended to Jackson in secret, coming early in the morning before the town woke and late at night after darkness fell. She changed his bandages, brought him food, and gradually watched color return to his face. He was a good patient, never complaining about the pain, though she could see it in the tightness around his eyes. They talked during those visits, cautious conversations at first that gradually deepened into something more meaningful. He told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to rope and ride before he could read, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 16 and making his way west to find work. She told him about Virginia, about her father's bookshop, and the way her grandmother's garden had smelled like sage and lavender, about the devastation of watching consumption slowly steal her father's strength until there was nothing left but grief. "Why did you come to California?" Jackson asked on the third evening as she rewrapped his shoulder. The wound was healing well, no sign of infection, and he could sit up now without too much difficulty. "I needed to start over somewhere no one knew me, somewhere I could be free of memory for a while." Clara tied off the bandage carefully. "I had heard that California was a place for new beginnings. And is it?" She met his eyes and saw genuine interest there, genuine caring. "I do not know yet. The way people talk about you," Jackson said quietly, "it makes me angry. You saved my life. You saved Thomas Caldwell's life. You have helped dozens of people in this town, and they repay you with suspicion and fear. People need someone to blame when things go wrong," Clara said with a shrug she did not feel. "It is easier to call me a witch than to admit that sometimes sickness and death just happen. It is not right. Perhaps not, but it is the way of things." She packed away her supplies. "You are healing well. Another few days and you should be able to ride." "I do not want to leave," Jackson said suddenly. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Clara felt her breath catch. "You have a job to return to." "I have been thinking." He reached out and caught her hand before she could move away. "I have been thinking that maybe there is something worth staying for, someone worth staying for. Jackson, you do not know me. I know enough. I know you are brave and skilled and kind. I know you risk yourself to help others. I know that when you smile, which is not often enough, it feels like the sun coming out from behind clouds." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I know that I have never met anyone like you, Clara Emerson." She wanted to pull away, to protect herself from the inevitable hurt that came from letting people close, but she could not seem to make herself move. "The town thinks I am a witch. Being associated with me will only bring you trouble. Then let them think what they want. I am not afraid of gossip." "You should be," Clara whispered. "It can be dangerous." She left before he could respond, fleeing into the night with her heart pounding and her thoughts in chaos. She had not expected this, had not expected him. She had resigned herself to loneliness, to being forever on the outside looking in. And now here was Jackson Andrews with his blue eyes and steady hands, offering her something she had thought was lost forever. The next morning, she woke to shouting in the street. Clara dressed quickly and hurried downstairs to find a crowd gathering near the church. Her stomach dropped when she saw the grim faces, the way people turned to stare at her when she appeared. Reverend Marcus stood on the church steps, his black suit and stern expression making him look like a figure from an Old Testament story. He was a narrow man with hard eyes, the kind of religious leader who saw sin everywhere and mercy nowhere. "Brothers and sisters," he called out, "we have been patient. We have turned a blind eye to the unnatural practices in our midst. But no more. Sarah Mitchell's baby died last night despite the ministrations of this woman. He pointed directly at Clara. How many more must suffer before we acknowledge the devil's work among us? Clara felt the blood drain from her face. She had gone to see Sarah Mitchell 2 weeks ago when the young mother had asked for help with her sickly infant. The baby had been born early, too small and weak, and Clara had known immediately that there was little she could do. She had given Sarah herbs to ease the baby's breathing and spent hours trying to get the tiny thing to nurse, but in her heart she had known it was likely futile. "I did everything I could," Clara said, but her voice was lost in the rising murmur of the crowd. "Witchcraft," someone shouted. "She cursed that child. My grandmother was sick for days after she visited." The accusations came faster now, each person adding their grievance, their fear transforming into anger right before her eyes. Clara looked around desperately for a friendly face but found none. Even the people she had helped looked away, unwilling to defend her against the mob's fury. "She should be tried," Reverend Marcus declared. "Let her prove she is no witch." "And how does one prove such a thing?" A voice rang out clearly. Jackson Andrews pushed through the crowd, moving stiffly but standing tall. "By surviving drowning, by not burning. These are no tests at all, merely murder dressed up as justice." "Stay out of this, Andrews," the Reverend said coldly. "This does not concern you, it concerns me greatly. This woman saved my life 3 days ago when I rode into town with a bullet in my shoulder. She asked for nothing in return, expected no gratitude, and worked through the night to keep me alive." Jackson moved to stand beside Clara, and she could see the pain the movement cost him, the way he held his right arm carefully. "She healed me, and I am grateful. I will not stand by and watch you persecute her for the crime of being skilled at something you do not understand." "She bewitched you," someone shouted. "She has her hooks in you. She has my gratitude and my respect, nothing more sinister than that." Jackson's voice was firm, brooking no argument. "Every one of you has benefited from her help at some point. Thomas Caldwell would be dead if not for her. Mary Henderson would have died of fever. The blacksmith's son would have succumbed to snake venom. You repay these kindnesses with accusations and threats." "The baby died," Reverend Marcus said. "There must be a reckoning. The baby was born too soon and too small. Ask the midwife if you do not believe me. Some things cannot be healed by any mortal hand, and blaming Miss Emerson for that is both cruel and unjust." The crowd wavered, uncertain now. Clara could see the doubt creeping into some faces, the shame in others, but Reverend Marcus was not finished. "You defend her because she has worked her dark magic on you," he said to Jackson. "Your judgment is compromised." "My judgment is clear," Jackson replied. "Clearer than it has been in a long time. And I say this woman is no witch but a healer, and anyone who tries to harm her will answer to me." The threat hung in the air, and Clara saw several men in the crowd touch their guns nervously. Jackson was known to be quick and accurate, a man not to be crossed. The crowd began to disperse slowly, sullenly, like a storm that had not quite broken. Reverend Marcus stared at them both with cold hatred before turning and walking back into his church. Clara found she was shaking. "You should not have done that. You have made yourself a target now. I could not stand by and let them hurt you." Jackson turned to her, and the tenderness in his expression made her chest ache. "You saved my life, Clara. That means something to me. It means everything." "Come," she said quietly. "You are still healing. You should not have been standing for so long." They walked back to the stable together, aware of the eyes that followed them. Once inside, Jackson sagged against a support post, his face pale with pain and exhaustion. "You tore something open," Clara said, examining his shoulder. Blood had seeped through the bandage. "Sit down before you fall down." He obeyed, lowering himself carefully onto a hay bale while she fetched her supplies. As she cleaned and redressed the wound, neither of them spoke. The silence felt heavy with unspoken words, with feelings that had grown too large to ignore. "I meant what I said out there," Jackson finally said, "about your healing me and being grateful, but there is more to it than that. Jackson, let me finish." He caught her wrist gently, stilling her hands. "I have spent the last 3 days talking with you, getting to know you, and I have come to care for you, Clara, deeply. In a way I have never cared for anyone before. You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough. I know that I want to know everything. I know that the thought of leaving here without you feels wrong. I know that when that crowd turned on you today, I would have fought every last one of them to keep you safe." His blue eyes searched hers. "Tell me you do not feel something too. Tell me I am alone in this and I will walk away." Clara could not tell him that because it would be a lie. She had felt the connection between them from the first moment, had felt herself drawn to him in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. "I am frightened," she admitted. "Everyone I have ever cared for has either died or abandoned me. The town thinks I am cursed, a witch. How can I ask you to tie yourself to that? You are not asking. I am offering." He stood slowly, towering over her, and cupped her face in his hands. "I am not afraid of gossip or superstition. I am only afraid of losing you before I have had the chance to show you how much you mean to me." "This is madness," Clara said, but she did not pull away. "Then let us be mad together." He leaned down and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. It was a kiss full of promise and hope, of desperate longing and tender affection. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "What do we do?" Clara asked. "The town will not accept this." "Then we leave. I have saved money. We can go somewhere new, start fresh where no one knows us and no one cares about rumors." Jackson took her hands in his. "Marry me, Clara. Let me protect you and care for you for the rest of our lives." "You are proposing to me in a stable while recovering from a gunshot wound," Clara said, but she was smiling through her tears. "I would propose to you in a palace or a pigsty. The location does not matter. You matter." "Yes," Clara said, the word escaping before she could think better of it. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married 3 days later by a traveling judge who happened to be passing through Calico, a man who cared more about the fee than the rumors. The ceremony was brief and simple, with only the stable boy and the general store owner's wife as witnesses. Clara wore her best dress, a simple blue calico that brought out her eyes, and Jackson stood tall beside her in clean clothes borrowed from the ranch. The town did not celebrate their union. If anything, the suspicion and hostility increased. Reverend Marcus preached a sermon about the dangers of bewitchment and the weakness of men who fell under dark spells. Twice, Clara found threatening notes slipped under her door. The general store owner asked her to find other lodgings, claiming her presence was bad for business. "We should leave," Jackson said one evening as they packed her meager belongings. His shoulder had healed well, the wound now just a puckered scar, and he was eager to be gone from Calico. "There is a ranch near Sacramento that is looking for a foreman. The pay is good, and no one there will know anything about witchcraft or accusations." "Will they accept a healer?" Clara asked. "They will accept my wife, which is all that matters." Jackson wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I promise you, Clara, we will find a place where you can practice your skills without fear, where people will be grateful rather than suspicious." They left Calico on a cool morning in late June, riding north with all their possessions packed on 2 horses. Clara did not look back at the town that had given her nothing but grief and suspicion. Instead, she focused on the man riding beside her, the husband who had defended her when no one else would, who saw her gifts as blessings rather than curses. The journey to Sacramento took 8 days, traveling slowly to spare the horses in the summer heat. They camped under the stars at night, and Jackson taught Clara how to cook over an open fire while she taught him about the plants they passed and their medicinal properties. They made love under the vast California sky, learning each other's bodies with tender exploration, and Clara felt herself healing in ways that had nothing to do with herbs or poultices. The ranch outside Sacramento was called the Lazy S, a sprawling operation with hundreds of cattle and dozens of horses. The owner, Samuel Sterling, was a weathered man in his 60s who looked Jackson up and down, asked pointed questions about his experience, and then hired him on the spot. "We have had trouble with rustlers and injuries," Samuel said. "Lost 3 good men this spring to various mishaps. You keep my cattle safe and my operation running smooth, and I will make it worth your while." "My wife is a healer," Jackson said carefully. "She has knowledge of herbs and treatments." Samuel glanced at Clara, his expression unreadable. "We have a doctor in town, but he is expensive and not always available. If she can help when someone gets hurt, I would be grateful. Ranch work is dangerous." It was as much acceptance as Clara could have hoped for, and she felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. They were given a small house on the ranch property, a 2-room cabin that was modest but clean. Clara immediately began exploring the area, identifying useful plants and starting a small garden. Jackson threw himself into his work, proving his worth quickly with his skill with horses and cattle. Within a month, Clara had treated her first ranch injury, a cowhand who had been kicked by a horse and suffered cracked ribs. She wrapped his chest tightly and gave him willow bark for the pain, and when he recovered without incident, word spread among the ranch workers. Unlike in Calico, there were no accusations of witchcraft here. The men simply saw her as someone useful, someone who could help when the doctor was too far away or too expensive. "You were right," Clara told Jackson one evening as they sat on their small porch watching the sunset. "This is better. I can help people without fear here." "You deserve to live without fear," Jackson said, pulling her close. "You deserve to be celebrated for your gifts, not persecuted." Life on the Lazy S fell into a comfortable rhythm. Jackson managed the cowboys and the cattle with firm but fair leadership, earning respect and loyalty. Clara became the unofficial ranch healer, treating everything from snake bites to broken bones to fevers. She and Jackson grew closer with each passing day, their love deepening from the passionate urgency of new marriage into something solid and enduring. In late October, Clara realized she was pregnant. The realization came gradually. A missed monthly cycle followed by morning nausea and an unfamiliar tenderness in her breasts. She waited to be certain before telling Jackson, wanting to be sure before raising his hopes. When she finally told him on a cool November evening, Jackson's face transformed with joy. He picked her up carefully and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Clara asked, though the answer was written plainly on his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. You have given me everything, Clara, a home, a purpose, and now a child." He kissed her softly. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already do," Clara said, resting her hand on her still flat stomach. "You defended me when I had no one. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me safety and acceptance." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter. Clara continued her healing work as long as she was able, though she let Jackson take over the more physically demanding tasks. The other ranch wives, initially wary of her, gradually warmed when they saw she was simply a woman like them, facing the same fears and hopes around childbirth. Their son was born in early June of 1882, a year almost to the day after they had left Calico. The birth was long and difficult, but Clara's knowledge of herbs helped ease the pain, and a midwife from Sacramento attended to ensure everything went smoothly. When Jackson held his newborn son for the first time, tears streamed down his face. "He is perfect," Jackson whispered, staring down at the tiny red face and dark fuzz of hair. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking James," Clara said tiredly from the bed. "After my father, James Andrews." Jackson tested the name and nodded. "I like it. James it is." Motherhood transformed Clara in ways she had not anticipated. She had spent so long caring for others that caring for her own child felt both natural and overwhelming. James was a healthy baby with strong lungs, and his father's blue eyes, and watching Jackson with their son made Clara fall in love with her husband all over again. He was patient and gentle, not afraid to change diapers or walk the floor with a crying infant, treating fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything else. When James was 3 months old, a letter arrived from Calico. It was forwarded through several addresses before finally reaching them, and the handwriting was shaky and uncertain. Clara opened it with trepidation, wondering what could possibly warrant contact after all this time. The letter was from Mary Henderson, the elderly woman whose fever Clara had broken the previous year. She wrote that Reverend Marcus had been exposed as a fraud and a thief, caught stealing from the church coffers and carrying on an affair with a married woman. The scandal had rocked Calico, and in the aftermath, many people had begun questioning his accusations and teachings. Several townspeople wanted to apologize to Clara for how they had treated her, Mary wrote, and to ask if she might ever consider returning. Clara read the letter twice, then handed it to Jackson. He scanned it quickly, his expression hardening. "They drove you out and now want you back because it is convenient for them," he said flatly. "They do not deserve you, I know," Clara said, "but it is good to know we were right. That there was never anything wrong with me or my healing. There was never any doubt in my mind." Jackson folded the letter and tossed it aside. "Are you going to respond?" "I think I will," Clara said slowly. "Not to say I will return, but to say I forgive them. Carrying anger serves no purpose." She wrote a brief letter to Mary Henderson thanking her for reaching out and wishing the people of Calico well. She mentioned her marriage and her son, her new life in Sacramento. She did not mention the fear and pain they had caused her, only that she hoped they would think more carefully before judging others in the future. It felt good to let go of that bitterness, to close that chapter of her life with grace rather than anger. Years passed in a blur of contentment and hard work. James grew into a sturdy toddler and then a curious child, following his father around the ranch and pestering his mother with endless questions. Clara's reputation as a healer spread beyond the Lazy S, and people came from miles around seeking her help. She never charged much, taking payment in goods or services, more interested in helping than in profit. When James was 4, Clara became pregnant again. This time a daughter joined their family, a tiny girl with her mother's gray eyes and a surprisingly loud cry. They named her Catherine after Clara's grandmother, and she proved to be as different from her brother as night from day. Where James was cautious and thoughtful, Catherine was bold and adventurous, getting into everything and keeping her parents constantly on their toes. Jackson thrived in his role as foreman, and when Samuel Sterling's health began to fail, the old man offered to sell Jackson a portion of the ranch. With their savings and a loan from the bank, Jackson and Clara became landowners, partners in the Lazy S. It was more than Clara had ever dreamed possible. this life of stability and respect, of love and family. On a warm evening in June of 1887, exactly 6 years after they had married, Clara and Jackson sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. James, now 5, was teaching 3-year-old Catherine how to rope a fence post, both of them laughing when the rope inevitably missed its mark. "Do you ever think about Calico?" Jackson asked, reaching over to take Clara's hand. "Sometimes," Clara admitted, "but not with regret. If I had not gone there, I would never have met you." "Everything happens for a reason," Jackson said, "even the hard things, especially the hard things." "You saved me that day," Clara said quietly. "When you stood up for me in front of the whole town, you gave me back my dignity and my courage." "No, Clara, you saved yourself long before I came along. You survived losing your father, starting over in a strange place, and facing persecution with grace and strength. I just recognized what was already there." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "All I did was love you, which was the easiest thing I have ever done." "I love you too," Clara said, her eyes filling with tears. "More than I have words to express." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors, listening to their children's laughter ring out across the ranch. Clara thought about the girl she had been when she arrived in Calico, alone and grieving, afraid of her own gifts and the judgment of others. She thought about the woman she had become, a mother and wife, a healer respected and valued, a partner in a successful ranch. The journey had been hard, filled with pain and fear and moments when she had thought she could not go on. But every step had led her here, to this moment, to this life she had built with Jackson. The town had accused her of witchcraft for healing, but Jackson had stood up and said she healed him, and he was grateful. And in doing so, he had given her something more precious than safety or acceptance. He had given her love, the kind of love that transformed and endured, the kind of love worth fighting for. "Mama, Papa, look!" Catherine shrieked from the yard, having finally managed to get the rope around the fence post. She jumped up and down with excitement, and James clapped for his little sister's success. "Well done, sweetheart," Clara called out, laughing. Jackson pulled Clara closer, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "This is everything," he said softly. "This is all I ever wanted." "Me too," Clara whispered, resting her head against his shoulder. "Me too." As the sun set over the California hills and the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Clara felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. She had found her place in the world, not through magic or miracles, but through courage and love and the willingness to keep trying even when things seemed impossible. She had found her home, not in a town or a building, but in the heart of a good man who saw her for exactly who she was and loved her all the more for it. The years continued to unfold with their mix of joy and challenge. Samuel Sterling passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1889, leaving his remaining share of the ranch to Jackson and Clara in his will. They renamed it the Double A Ranch, for Andrews, and continued to build it into one of the most successful operations in the region. Clara's healing practice grew as well, and she began training other women in the area, passing on her grandmother's knowledge to a new generation. James grew into a tall young man with his father's steady nature and his mother's compassionate heart. He had no interest in healing, preferring to work with the cattle and horses, but he defended his mother's work fiercely to anyone who questioned it. Catherine, predictably, showed an early aptitude for healing, shadowing her mother and learning everything she could about herbs and treatments. When James was 16 and Catherine 14, a young woman arrived at the ranch seeking help. She was thin and bruised, fleeing an abusive husband in a nearby town, and Clara took her in without hesitation. Jackson supported the decision completely, and they gave the woman, whose name was Emma, a job and a safe place to stay. Over the months that followed, Emma healed both physically and emotionally, and Clara taught her about herbs and healing as a way to give her a skill and confidence. It reminded Clara of her own journey, of how lost she had felt when she arrived in Calico all those years ago. The difference was that Emma had found safety immediately, had not been forced to endure suspicion and persecution before finding acceptance. Clara was glad to provide that for her, glad that the ranch had become a place where people could come for healing of all kinds. In the spring of 1893, as Clara approached her 40th birthday, she and Jackson celebrated 25 years of marriage. Their children organized a party, inviting everyone from the ranch and the surrounding area. It was a joyful gathering filled with music and food and laughter, a celebration of not just a marriage but of the life they had built together. As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Clara and Jackson slipped away to walk along the creek that ran through their property. The moon was bright overhead, turning the water to silver, and the air was sweet with the scent of wildflowers. 25 years, Jackson said wonderingly. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I know what you mean, Clara said, lacing her fingers through his. When I think about that girl in Calico, so afraid and alone, it feels like looking at a stranger. You were never truly alone, Jackson said. Even before I knew you, you had yourself, your strength and courage and refusal to give up even when things were darkest. I would not have survived without you, Clara said firmly. You gave me a reason to keep fighting. And you gave me a reason to become a better man, to be someone worthy of your love. Jackson stopped walking and turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands the way he had that first time in the stable all those years ago. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara Andrews. Every day with you is a gift. I love you, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. They kissed there in the moonlight, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful and lasting. The journey had been long and often painful, but every hardship had been worth it to arrive at this moment, this life, this love. As they walked back to the house, they could see James and Catherine sitting on the porch, talking and laughing together. Emma was with them, looking happy and healthy, a far cry from the frightened woman who had arrived seeking help. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and peaceful, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. Clara thought about all the lives she had touched with her healing, all the people she had helped over the years. But more than that, she thought about the life she had built with Jackson, the family they had created, the love they had nurtured. That was her greatest accomplishment, not the healing or the ranch or the respect of the community, but this profound connection with another human being, this partnership that had weathered every storm. The town had accused her of witchcraft for healing, had tried to destroy her for the crime of being different, of being skilled at something they did not understand. But Jackson had stood up and said she healed him, and he was grateful, and in doing so, he had changed the course of both their lives. His defense had been more than just words. It had been a declaration of love and loyalty, a promise that he would stand by her no matter what came. And he had kept that promise every day since, through good times and hard times, through joy and sorrow, through all the ordinary moments that made up a life. He had loved her completely and without reservation, and in return, she had given him the same fierce, unwavering devotion. As they climbed the porch steps and joined their children, Clara felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it almost brought her to her knees. This was more than she had ever hoped for, more than she had ever dreamed possible during those dark days in Calico. She had found not just acceptance but love, not just survival but joy, not just a place to live but a true home. "Are you all right, Mama?" Catherine asked, noticing the tears on her mother's face. "I am more than all right," Clara said, smiling through her tears. "I am blessed beyond measure." Jackson put his arm around her, and their children gathered close, and for a long moment, they all stood together under the vast California sky. A family bound by blood and love, and the choice to stand together no matter what came. The future stretched out before them, unknown and full of possibility, but Clara was not afraid. With Jackson by her side and her children surrounding her, she could face anything. The story of how the town accused her of witchcraft for healing, and the cowboy said she healed him, and he was grateful, had become their origin story, the beginning of everything good in their lives. It was a story they would tell their grandchildren someday, a reminder that love could triumph over fear, and that standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult, was always worth it. As the stars wheeled overhead and the night deepened around them, Clara sent up a silent prayer of thanksgiving. For Jackson, who had seen her when she was invisible to everyone else. For their children, who filled their lives with purpose and joy. For this ranch, this home, this life they had built together from nothing but determination and love. And for herself, for having the courage to survive the darkness and embrace the light when it finally came. This was her happily ever after, not perfect but real, not easy but worth every struggle. And as she stood there surrounded by everyone she loved, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single moment of the journey that had brought her here. Every trial had shaped her, every hardship had strengthened her, and every tear had watered the seeds of the happiness that now bloomed all around her. The cowboy who had said she healed him and he was grateful, had given her the greatest gift imaginable. A life filled with love, a family to cherish, and the freedom to be exactly who she was meant to be. And in return, she had given him her whole heart, her unwavering devotion, and a partnership that would endure through all the years to come. This was their story, a love story born in the Wild West, forged in adversity and perfected through time. And it was far from over.